Hello ladies and gentlemen, once again this is Jeremy Smith, Photog J the Great. Today we're going to be taking a look at Sigma's new 50mm 1.4 Art Series lens. This is an absolutely massive lens to be a 50mm. There's something about this past year and 50mm lenses. All the camera companies seem to be coming out with very exotic 50mm lenses. We took a look at Nikon's 58mm 1.4 not long ago. And that was a very interesting lens. You guys remember we went out and we were able to do a shoot with it, and the biggest thing that we found about it was that it produced extremely nice bokeh, and it rendered point light sources very well. The sharpness was honestly, it's sharp, but it's honestly nothing, was nothing impressive in that neighborhood. And I talked about how it was very good for video because of that wonderful bokeh, etc. However, the Sigma 50mm 1.4 is a little bit different. Its main attribute that stands out to me a lot is its extreme sharpness. This lens is extremely sharp at 1.4. We also looked at Sigma's 35mm 1.4 Art Series lens about a year ago, and that was pretty much the same thing that we found on it. I actually did decide to buy the Sigma 35 1.4 Art Series lens just because I was so impressed with it. And it's the first Sigma lens I've ever bought. Well, it's the first non-Nikon lens I've ever bought, period. So that's saying something right there. And we will be taking a look at that lens again in a future video. But anyways, more about the 51.4. The one thing I thought that was interesting about this lens is that it's got a lot of elements for a 50. In a moment, you guys will see how much bigger it is than the 50mm 1.4G Nikkor. This lens, though, has 13 elements in 8 groups, whereas the Nikon 50mm 1.4G comes in at 8 elements in 7 groups. So there's a pretty drastic difference. This lens also has a 77mm filter size versus the 58mm filter size of the Nikkor. And we'll be looking at these two close up in just a second. But it's definitely noteworthy that the Sigma has a much more complicated optical formula. And that's something that, they obviously put a lot of design into this lens. I haven't been able to get my hands on a Nikon copy of it yet, and I was so eager to test it that I actually borrowed a Canon 5D Mark III to test it on, since I was only able to get my hands on the Canon mount so far. So kind of consider this video to be the introduction. As always, I will put some sample photos in the description below. And yeah, the biggest thing I've noticed so far is that this lens is just extremely sharp. We will be doing some more testing, but I'm not really as comfortable doing that testing on the Canon body. I'd much rather wait until I get a Nikon copy. So definitely be on the lookout for a future video on this lens coming up very soon. Until then though, let's go ahead and take a closer look at this lens. As I just mentioned, the Sigma 50mm 1.4 Art Series lens is yet another expensive 50mm lens. It's not quite as expensive as the $1,800 Nikkor we looked at not long ago. However, this lens does have a USD price of $950, which is definitely not inexpensive when it comes to 50mm. If we take a look at this lens in comparison to the 50mm 1.4G Nikkor, you'll realize that the Sigma is much larger. This Nikon lens has a front filter size of 58mm, and as you can see, it's reasonably small and compact. The 1.4 Sigma has a 77mm front element, and it's a very large and heavy lens. No doubt a result of the more complicated optical formula. Basically, by having more elements and groups, this lens, with more complicated optical designs comes the effect of having more aberrations and such compensated for in lens design. But yeah, it's very similar to the 35mm 1.4 Sigma in the sense that it's pretty much the same finish. It doesn't have weather sealing, so if we look at the back, the lens doesn't have any type of gasket or anything behind there, but of course it is a metal mount. And as I just mentioned, this is a Canon mount lens. It is a bit of a fingerprint magnet, but anyways, I do like the fact that the focus ring has a very nicely damped feel to it. Of course, the Art Series designation, and then we have an AF and MF switch there. And so you can already see my fingerprints. I told you it was a fingerprint magnet, but oh well. So all in all, a very, very good lens. I will put a couple of samples in the description for you guys. But as I said, because I haven't had a whole lot of time to test this, and since I tested it on something other than a Nikon, you know, which I know the 5D3 well enough, but I would much rather have shot it on the D800. Until I get the opportunity to do so, I'm going to just kind of leave this as like part one, and part two is kind of up to you guys, honestly. As soon as I do get a Nikon version of the lens, I'd like to hear in the comments what you guys would like to see me do with it. I've thought about doing some comparison testing, maybe compare it to a couple of other 50s, maybe the 58 1.4, maybe something like the Canon 50mm 1.2 L series. But anyways, these are all just a few thoughts I kind of had. Let me know in the comments below what you guys would like to see me do next. Until next time, this is Jeremy Smith, Photog J the Great, signing off.